Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is Sunday, day 134 of TowerGate, July the 16th, 2017. Thank you so much for tuning in. Oh my goodness. We're actually going to be able to talk a little bit today about the Ukrainian situation with the real collusion that happened during the 2016 election. So we are going to get to that today finally after 2 days of having to blow that off. So before we get to that though, the main topic, just a couple minor topics I want to point out. First of all, extraordinary comment made by Diane Fine, Turn in Your Guns, Mrs. America Feinstein. She has recently been quoted, I'm not sure what day it was, but she's recently been quoted in stating, quote, "The left has tried to take down President Donald Trump and ignored the issues the American people care about." That's extraordinary. Dianne Feinstein. The left has tried to take down President Donald Trump and ignore the issues the American people care about. Dead on, Dianne, Turn in Your Guns, Mr. and Mrs. America Feinstein. Let's see if those members of your party pay attention to that. Now, Dianne, she's a nasty liberal. She's been around a very long time, but she's not an idiot. Unlike Pelosi, who is an idiot. Unlike Maxine Waters, who is an idiot. Unlike Mr. Schumer, Little Chucky, who is an idiot. I can assure you, Dianne Feinstein, she's pretty shrewd, she's pretty smart, she's not an idiot, and she nails it on this particular comment. We'll see if they take her advice. Next thing, I'm watching MSNBC, and they have one of their eggheads, experts, and he's really focusing on this thing in the Trump Jr. email about the Russian government having this intel. And he really is focusing hard on the fact that when he saw that it was the Russian government that had this intel, that he should have walked away. Well, you know, there's something about this that's bothered me since I first read that email where he's referring to the Russian government. Let's think about what we're actually talking about here. If this is true, then what we have to believe is that the Russian government turned to a British high-profile media PR guy to carry their message. What does a professional PR guy do? Well, his job is to get his client's name out in the public eye as much as possible. These Hollywood idiots like the Kardashians and others pay PR people big money to make sure that their name and face are on the cover of one of those garbage magazines every day of the week. And it doesn't even matter if it's a negative story. They just want to make sure that their picture and something about them is on the front page of some paper every day of the week so that it keeps them in the limelight, keeps them in the controversy, keeps them in the conversation, keeps them on people's minds. This is what a PR guy does, especially someone like this gentleman from the UK who was an international PR guy. This guy is connected to everybody. If this guy wants to drop your name and have it put into a major publication, it happens. So why in the world would the Russian government turn to someone, a foreigner in the UK, whose job it is to be a blabbermouth, to take their message to, and we can assume that the Russian government did not want this to be public knowledge. We can assume that they'd want to keep this on the down low. So why would you go to a guy whose job it is to be a propagandist, a PR master, of leaking things, of talking about things that are controversial? Why would you do that? You would go, if you're the Russian government, you would, first of all, you would never subcontract this out to someone like this man. You would handle it within your own intelligence agencies. You would send one of your best intel people to very quietly and very carefully approach someone around the Trump administration or the Trump campaign at that time and say, hey, we've got some information about Hillary Clinton and some nasty, nasty things, some illegal things that she's doing. You want to talk? This is how that would happen. The Russian government would never trust this guy. They would never, it just doesn't make any sense. Why would you go to a guy whose job is to, create propaganda and PR and to draw attention to things? Why would you go to this guy to carry out this secret mission? which is essentially what it will be. It will be a secret intelligence mission. I mean, did the Russian government want this to become public? I doubt that, if it was really true. And again, as I asked the question a couple days ago, who is this PR guy, this British PR guy, that Mr. Goldstone, that government officials will be turning to for him to set up this meeting? And none of it makes sense. That's why I asked the question, who was it that contacted Mr. Goldstone? Who was it that put Mr. Goldstone up to making that phone call to setting up that meeting? Who was it that, and believe me, they definitely wanted that phrase, Russian government, in that email. See, the Russians will be smart enough to tell this guy that even if they were to go to this PR guy, Mr. Goldstone, and say, yeah, we want you to work on our behalf to arrange this meeting, blah, 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 with the Trump, but you gotta be low-key about it. And they would tell him right off the bat, do not send an email, do not make a phone call, do not do any form of electronic communication, because the American intelligence agencies monitor and capture every single communication on the planet. So you certainly wouldn't do it by sending an email and in the body of the email saying, yeah, the Russian government's got some intel for you. None of this stuff makes sense, man. This is almost like you couldn't sell this in a bad spy novel. No one would believe it. You'd be reading it going, wait a minute. This guy's going to send an email and talk about the Russian government wanting to give secret intel to the Trump administration? No, this would never happen in real life. The Russians aren't that stupid. But who is that stupid? Hillary Clinton and her minions are that stupid. That's exactly who's that stupid. I think we'll find out, and I certainly hope we do, find out who was it that urged Mr. Goldstone to set up this meeting. Something tells me it may be someone like Christopher Steele, or maybe Glenn Simpson, or maybe a friend of the Clintons, maybe someone that they know in the UK. They have a lot of friends in the UK. They have a lot of dirt on a lot of people in the UK. I wonder if Slick Willie was on the tarmac at Heathrow International anytime around the end of December, first week of January. Okay. That's just my thoughts on that. And I think I raised a very good point there. And this person on MSNBC that's trying to focus on this, the very fact that he's focusing on the fact that the Russian government was mentioned in this email, him being a reporter, this is automatically, he should have the exact same questions I am having if he's actually an investigative journalist and a real reporter. These are the type of questions that you would ask. Who, what, where, when, how, why. To everything. If you're a journalist, every single thing you're told, every single thing you read, every single thing you hear, you ask who, what, why, when, where, how. Journalism 101, folks. First week, chapter 1, paragraph 1. My goodness. Let's talk about Ukraine and the real collusion. January 11th, 2017, we get the story from Politico, a publication which hates Donald Trump, by the way, runs a story on January 11, 2017, Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. You can Google that article and read it. I'm sure many of you have already heard excerpts from it. The Ukrainian government officials tried to help Hillary Rodham Clinton and undermine Trump by publicly questioning his fitness for office. Also, they disseminated documents implicating a top Trump aide, that would be Paul Manafort, and corruption, and suggested that they were investigating the matter, only to back away after the election. And they helped Clinton. With her research to find damaging information on Trump and his advisors. Now, as the story lays out, Manafort had been working with Yanukovych, the previous president of Ukraine, who was taken out in a deep state coup by the European Union and the U.S. State Department, using fascist groups backed by George Soros. And we know all about that. They ran Yanukovych out. And it appears that this person, this Chalupa person, had been following the story then, and that's where this all began. So Manafort was working for Yanukovych. He was caught, who was caught in the eye of a veteran Democratic. This was caught the eye of a veteran Democratic operative named Alexandra Chalupa. Alexandra Chalupa, who had worked in the Clinton White House during the Clinton administration, and the DNC paid Chalupa $412,000 from 2004 to 2016, according to FEC, Federal Election Commission, records. Chalupa told Politico that she developed a network of sources in Kiev and Washington, including investigative journalists, government officials, private intelligence operatives, and she shared her findings with the DNC and the Clinton campaign. So there's some more collusion for you. The real collusion between the Democratic National Committee, the Hillary Clinton campaign, the government of Ukraine that was put in place after the coup carried out by Hillary Clinton's State Department, the EU, and the George Soros-backed fascist. Information was shared, was cultivated and shared with the DNC and the Clinton campaign, and she was paid. She was paid. The Washington Times reports that the real collusion in the 2016 election took place between the DNC, Hillary Clinton campaign, and the government of Ukraine. Correct amundo. That is it. Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee colluded with the foreign government, Ukraine, to sabotage the Trump campaign and U.S. democracy. That's from another source. Here's a question. Did Christopher Steele, Fusion GPS, or any other government or foreign or domestic intelligence service collude with the Hillary Clinton campaign to affect the U.S. election? I think that we're starting to see some facts emerge that would give us an affirmative answer to that question. Did Christopher Steele, Fusion GPS, or any other government, foreign, or domestic intelligence service collude with the Hillary Clinton campaign to affect the U.S. election? Well, we can answer some of that question. We know for a fact that Christopher Steele did collude with the Hillary Clinton campaign and the media. We know that Fusion GPS did collude with the Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC, and the media. We know that a foreign government of Ukraine colluded with the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign to affect the U.S. election. And we can only assume at this point, based on what we know, based on the fact that Hillary Clinton's boy, John Brennan, was head of the CIA, and the incompetent dupe, Comey, working for Obama's point man, Loretta Lynch, who fell into line and did what he was told, part of a cover-up at the very least, if not part of the operation. So I think we already know the answer to this question, but no one's really asking it in the Congress. And the man who really should be asking this question is the man who's going to do something about it. His name is Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who's apparently busy sitting in his sauna, farting and biting the bubbles, reading the New York Times. We are now getting reports that the Haitian official Klaus Eberheim told some friends that he feared for his life because of fierce criticism of the Clinton Foundation. You know, Jeff Sessions, I don't know if you've read this story in the paper, but you might want to wake up and put down your crossword puzzle and get out of the sauna. Rinse your mouth out with some soap or some Listerine or whatever product you prefer, and start focusing on the damn issues. Start focusing on your damn job. You're the highest ranking law enforcement person in the country. You have crimes being committed. They're going to keep being committed until you begin to stop them. Here we have another clear suicide of another person close to the Clintons who had information on the Clintons, who had information on the Clinton Foundation. He seemed to be a happy-go-lucky man, very happy about the expansion of his business with his partners, stopped into Miami, and as one of our commenters on my recent video pointed out, Debbie Wasserman Schultz's district, and apparently this is not the first person to have suffered such consequences in the district of Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz. No siree. Mr. Eberheim is just another person who committed suicide in the district of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who had damaging information on her or the Clintons and their friends. Jeff Sessions, you need to start doing your damn job. You need to investigate this. Ron DeSantis, member of a powerful committee that deals in intelligence, has now called on Sessions to investigate Comey for leaks and for all the and he's pointing the finger at the Obama administration holdovers, and he is suggesting that Donald Trump needs to fire the Obama holdovers immediately, as Jeff Sessions should be investigating Comey for the leaks. That's a good man right there, Ron DeSantis. That's one member of Congress that's actually using his voice for something other than propaganda or participation in the coup. Thank you very much, Mr. DeSantis. I hope you get a bigger microphone, a louder microphone, and hopefully some of your friends can wake up. Maybe you can wake up Jeff Sessions. He's snoring, he's snoozing, he's sleeping, reading the New York Times, doing the crossword puzzle, and sitting in the bathtub, farting and biting the bubbles. That's what Mr. Sessions spends most of his time engaged in. Here's a question for you. Will John McCain lie under oath when he's called to be a witness in the civil trial it's going on against BuzzFeed and Christopher Steele? Will he put it on Comey? You know, McCain, who I understand recently had a little problem with a blood clot behind his eye, possibly his medication got mixed up or something with his medication may have caused this blood clot behind his eye, forced him to have an emergency surgery. He's out of commission. But, you know, Mr. Magoo, as I mentioned to you, might want to remember that when it comes to the deep state, when you become a liability to them, bad things happen to you. I suggested yesterday, before this story even came out, that Mr. McCain might want to have someone check his medicine very carefully in the future, because he doesn't know the individual filling his prescription might be a friend of the deep state. They could arrange a special prescription for him to make sure that he never has to testify. Another thing Mr. McCain could do is lie. He's very good at that. And, you know, if Mr. McCain's smart, he will take a look at what the Susan Rice and Loretta Lynch, and apparently what the Clinton and Obama deep staters are doing. It appears that they're trying to make James Comey the scapegoat. We'll find out more after we hear or learn about what comes from these hearings that they're going to be a part of, which of course are closed session. But some of that information will find its way to the surface and will be leaked. And I believe, as I've stated in several videos, that they will try to finger John McCain and make him the scapegoat. If McCain is smart, and he's probably being advised of this as well, he will turn it on to James Comey. Make him the scapegoat as well. Everybody can point the finger at James Comey. He set himself up to be a scapegoat and dupe. He's done that himself. He has set himself up to be a dupe. Think about it. McCain sends his buddy over to retrieve the dossier. He gets it, brings it back to McCain, and on January the 4th, 2017, John McCain walks in and gives the dossier to James Comey. Then, on January 9th, 5 days later, James Comey, along with Admiral Rogers and Mr. Brennan, briefed Trump at Trump Towers on the dossier. And the very next day, BuzzFeed publishes the entire dossier on January the 10th. Could be very easy for Mr. McCain to go, hey, I gave the dossier to James Comey on the 4th. And then 5 days later, it popped up in BuzzFeed. Maybe you should talk to James Comey, who will probably at that time be under some sort of scrutiny and under some sort of questioning about the leaking that we know that he's done. He admitted to leaking to his buddy at Columbia University for the purpose of getting a special prosecutor to destroy the presidency. He admitted that under oath. You see, James Comey may have set himself up to be the perfect fall guy, the perfect dupe. And if you look at an aggregate of polls for the past 90 days, when all this stuff has been going on, the Trump-Russia thing, all the stuff, all the media propaganda going on, the attack by the deep state and their attempt to carry out their coup, the aggregate of polls in the last 90 days show that Trump is riding consistently between 40 and 45%. There are no dips, there are no humps, nothing. He's been staying pretty close to 40, 45% in an aggregate of polls in his approval rating, telling you that none of this is having much impact on him. But it sure is having a negative impact on CNN and MSNBC. It sure is having a negative impact on the Democrats' ability to raise money and to work out the problems in their organization and to work out the differences between the deep staters, the corporatists, and the Bernie Sanders supporters. None of their problems are being solved, and they don't appear to be having much effect on Trump's overall approval ratings. They're staying pretty much the same for the past 90 days. Maybe this is why Diane Turn In Your Guns, Mr. and Mrs. America Feinstein, is suggesting that they need to get off it and start dealing with their own problems, which are deep and quite severe. And they've got a lot more problems coming because people on their side of the aisle will soon be having to answer some questions. Some of those people, Susan Rice and Loretta Lynch and James Comey, have already essentially admitted to crimes. It's a question of whether or not they can put it off on someone else. All this reminds me a lot of, the Kennedy assassination and with the sheep dipping and setup of Lee Harvey Oswald. Very, very similar situation. With Lee Harvey Oswald, nobody heard anything about Lee Harvey Oswald until the day that they arrested him and brought him in and charged him with the murder of Officer Tippit, and then later the afternoon added to that the charge of assassinating the president. Nobody had heard anything of Lee Harvey Oswald. But once Lee Harvey Oswald was plastered all over the TV sets all over the country, and people could see his face and hear his name, all of a sudden out of the woodwork came all of these things that of all these people who had remembered Lee Harvey Oswald for extraordinarily stupid things that he did. For example, we had many stories that started coming out a week after his name and picture were released as being the culprit for the Tippit and Kennedy murders. First, we had the guy who came out who owned the gun range. He said, hey, that Lee Harvey Oswald guy, that's the guy that came out to my gun range and started firing at some other guy's target and then started a confrontation with him and then told the guy before he left, hey, you remember me. My name is Lee Harvey Oswald. And then, a couple days later, he shows up in a gun store and starts making some rather unusual request in purchasing a sniper rifle. And it was pretty peculiar because he never came back. But once seeing his picture and his name plastered all over the news, the guy who owned the gun store called in and said, hey, that guy that I just saw on TV, he was in my gun store. Yeah, he's kind of strange, and he was asking me these questions and stuff, and he told me for sure, wrote it down, told me to write it down, Lee Harvey Oswald. Then we have the guy who owned the car lot in Dallas-Fort Worth, who calls up and also says, yeah, that guy you just showed on the TV, his picture and his name, that Lee Harvey Oswald guy that you say killed the president and the cop, he was on my car lot. And he's a real strange guy. And he was talking to me about all this stuff and started talking about how, if I had a real good car lot, I'd be selling a Russian car, and how capitalism is terrible. And then he told me to remember his name, Lee Harvey Oswald. Then, of course, we have Lee Harvey Oswald turning up on the streets of New Orleans, passing out these Fair Play for Cuba things that were supposedly in support of Cuba, while at the very same time, the address given on the flyers led back to the offices of Guy Bannister, who was a former FBI head and connected to the intelligence agencies. And out of his office there in New Orleans, they were running the anti-Castro Cuban operations, where they were funneling arms and recruiting Cubans to fight, hopefully, another war against Castro. We also had Lee Harvey Oswald then going onto a public radio station and espousing the benefits of Marxism and laying out the difference between Marxism and communism. All these things. Also, he supposedly showed up in Mexico twice. Once at the consulate and once at the Russian embassy in Mexico. All these things popped up on the radar screen, and all these extraordinary events all popped up after people saw his name and picture plastered all over their TV sets and newspapers. But all these events happened before that. So this is what a sheep-dipped patsy is. This is how the intelligence agencies operate. All those things that Lee Harvey Oswald was involved in individually and on their own, not connected to any narrative, mattered little. He was just some nut who walked into a gun store or onto a car lot or onto a firing range or went onto a radio station or passed out. None of these things on their own individually mattered a whole hell of a beans. But when you presented the narrative of, hey, this is the guy that just killed the president and then the cop, and he's a Marxist and a communist, and he was in Russia, and he defected to Russia and all this stuff, then, only then, did all those other little activities that he had been put up to, did they ever make sense? And then, of course, we had the photo that comes out showing him holding the guns, which is clearly a doctored photo. You can see the head doesn't even work on the body. The head's kind of looking this way, the body's kind of straight, the head's too small, the shadows are in the wrong place. It looked like someone put a different head on someone's body. Because they did. It was a doctored photo. So all these things were all done. Lee Harvey Oswald was picked as the man who was set up to be the patsy months in advance. So they set up their patsy, they had him do all these things, and then when the time came and they dropped the situation on him and they arrested him because he went to the theater where my guess is he was supposed to meet somebody. I'm thinking David Ferry. And of course, when David Ferry wasn't there to get him out of the country or get him out of town anyway, instead the entire Dallas police force shows up to arrest him, despite the fact that the phone call that was made was just about some guy sneaking into the theater. So I guess the Dallas Police Department, shortly after the death of the president and of the police officer, J.D. Tippit, you would think they'd have all their officers focused on these crime scenes and doing these other things. A phone call comes in about a guy who snuck into the Texas theater, and they send every cop they got to the Texas theater. Never did the individual say it was Lee Harvey Oswald. Never did the individual say he looked like Lee Harvey Oswald. There was no belief at all at that point by the dispatcher taking the call that that person was Lee Harvey Oswald. Yet they sent every cop they had to the theater to get Lee Harvey Oswald. They knew he was going to be there at the theater. They knew that. And the man that Lee Harvey Oswald was counting on to meet him there and get him the hell out of there didn't show. And that's how they got Lee Harvey Oswald. And of course, then they had already put him through all of the sheep dipping in the previous months to make sure that his activities coincided closely with the narrative. There you have it, my friends. That's how the deep state works. And this looks a lot like what has been happening here with this particular coup against President Trump. You can see that they pitched the narrative 8-9 months ago about Russia-Trump collusion, and since then we get day after day after day of stories and leaks and insinuations and accusations that would support the narrative. We get this meeting with Donald Trump Jr., and we all know about what a setup that was. That's pretty obvious to see. So it's becoming, well, it's been obvious to me for quite some time, but for those of you who haven't quite connected the dots, there you go. So that's what we have going on. We have Jeff Sessions Jeff Sessions actually wants to do something meaningful, and he wants to actually work some things out here he might want to try to look into the real collusion that happened. We know for a fact, Mr. Sessions, that real collusion happened in the Democratic primary. We know that the DNC, we know that the Hillary Clinton campaign and certain members of the left-wing media, which is most of it, colluded to take down Bernie Sanders, to destroy any chance he had of winning the nomination. We have clear collusion there. It's all spelled out in the WikiLeaks emails, Mr. Sessions. You do not even have to put an investigation together. Julian Assange has done that for you. Just read the fucking emails, Jeff. That's all you need to do, and you'll see the collusion there clearly. The collusion that denied Bernie Sanders the opportunity to represent his party. The collusion between the DNC, Hillary Clinton, and the media, right there in front of your face, Mr. Sessions. There's some collusion for you. We also now have the facts, thanks to a left-wing publication, the Politico, laying out exactly what happened there with the Ukrainian situation and Mrs. Chalupa. We now know that there was clear collusion there between the Ukrainian government, the Hillary Clinton campaign, and the DNC to sabotage Trump. And in fact, and unlike the situation with Donald Jr., where no information or documents were actually transmitted back and forth or processed or received or sent or anything like that, or gathered or taken possession of, nothing. In fact, the meeting didn't even talk about anything about Hillary Clinton because, as it turns out, the female lawyer, when she showed up there, Natalia, didn't know a damn thing about it. But in the case of this Ukraine, oh yes, we have Mrs. Chalupa paid $412 grand. She was paid for what she was doing, and she provided documents to the Hillary Clinton campaign and to the DNC from the Ukrainian government. That, Mr. Sessions, is called collusion. That's what that is, Mr. Sessions. So there you have two clear cases of collusion that were happening and have happened, and the proof is there. There's absolutely no denying it, and you haven't done a damn thing. So that is what we have going on for today. And TowerGate, day 134, Sunday, July the 16th, 2017. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for sharing my videos. I love reading all your comments and replying to them when I can. I appreciate you all very much. Thank you for staying with me on this story. We'll stick through on this story until the bloody end. I can assure you of that. You all take care and have a good evening. Thanks again.